Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the daily Rambam Shir, 3 chapters per day, lesson 110, and we are covering the rules of Nedarim from the 4th until the 6th chapter. Once upon a time, at the time when the Hasidic movement, the Chabad movement, was just at the dawn of its appearance, so it was quite a strong opposition amongst the rabbinical community due to a lack of knowledge and other politics that came into the picture. So the view towards them, towards the movement, was quite negative. So one of the members of a community was introduced to Hasidism, to Hasidus, to the teachings of the Alter Rebbe, and he became a Chassid. His family got very, very upset, and even his new father-in-law, which was a very rich and quite esteemed person in the community, he got furious, not only for him studying the Hasidus, not only going to the Rebbe, but also acting and living as a Hasid. And he told him, listen, the only way you will be able to live with my daughter and enjoy all the luxurious condition that I am providing you is if you will promise me that no more any traveling, no more communication with the Rebbe, and the only way I will accept your promise if it will be done by a neder al das rabbim, as we have learned yesterday, that when a person is giving over the power of attorney to the community for them to determine the severity of the neder, so he obeys to whatever condition they imposed in the neder. So, and as we have learned yesterday, it will be a neder al das rabbim, a neder on the mind of the community, such a neder that doesn't have any ability to release the neder, to release the vow. Okay, he loved his wife and he was very accustomed to his lifestyle. So he made a neder al das rabbim that no more he will be able to continue his communication, his ties to Chabad, to the movement. But after a short while, which for him was very long, the yearning and the pain and the agony for him being removed from his Rebbe bothered him. And he thought he must take advice, and the only one that he is trusted to give him an advice on this matter will be only the Rebbe himself. So he travels to the Alter Rebbe, and he shares with him his dilemma, that right now he was giving a neder, he was giving a vow, al da'as rabbim, on the mind of the entire community, that cannot be removed. On the other hand, his life is not a life without a Rebbe. What should he do? The Alter Rebbe looked at him and he was pondering in his thought, and after a while he said the following sentence. He says, it's true that a neder al das rabbim, a vow that is being done on the mind, on the intention of the many, of the crowd, is a strong neder. However, when those rabbim, when those many, when this crowd have no da'as, they are lacking. Da'as is a play of word. Da'as means intention, but da'as means also literally brain. So when the rabbim, when the many are lacking, they don't have the da'as, so the neder to begin with is not a neder. In order for the neder, for the vow to be a vow, those rabbim, the many, must have a das. But when they are lacking it, you cannot take the neder doesn't take effect to begin with. The reason that I'm introducing the lesson with this story, since indeed the topic in the first chapter of the Rambam of the daily shiur indeed deals in those situations where a person can go and give a vow without the intention even to make good on his promise. We have learned in Shavuos, when it comes to a robber or illegitimate tax collectors, we spoke what is illegitimate tax collector, or they being appointed by themselves, or even they are appointed by the government, but nevertheless they have all those shtickes where they can gouge and add extra dollars to their own pocket. So by doing so, they're losing their legitimacy and they're being viewed as pirates, and as such, it is even permitted to give them a false vow. Example, if this tax collector tells you, I want you to vow upon yourself any benefits from wine and meat if you are declaring a false declaration regarding the duty that is owed. So it's okay for him, yes, I will forbid upon myself to eat meat and to drink wine and to taste any fruits, although the idea of adding fruits was not requested by the tax collector, nevertheless he volunteers. So despite the fact that he volunteered the added product that was not even requested, he's still not obligated to make good on this vow, since the party that demands this vow, to begin with, they are illegit. For that reason, what is being recommended, however, for the person when he gives the vow, to have in mind when he tells to the pirate, well, this wine and the meat is forbidden, he must have in mind that it will be forbidden for 5 minutes, for an hour, a limit of time that will give some sort of legitimacy for him to saying this type of vow. So this is one type of vow that it's okay for a person to not have even have the intention to make good on it. There is a second type of vow when a person, we spoke about it, what is called shgogois. Shgogois, a person was under the wrong presumption. A person was under a presumption that someone have harmed him or made a certain terrible act. And as a result of this, what he thinks that this is a terrible act, he takes upon himself a vow that this individual won't be able to benefit from my property. Turns out later it was only imaginatory suspicion about the person, but the person is really innocent. So then he doesn't have any obligation to make good on his vow, because the entire vow came on the wrong presumption. There is
a little bit of contradictory with whatever you said yesterday, that the person cannot change his mind.
He cannot change when the presumption. Yeah, so it all depends what type of presumption. There is something what we called noilot, something that was born, or something that was to begin with did not happen. There is a difference when I'm taking upon myself a vow not to communicate with an individual, regardless, because for whatever reason, later this individual was promoted to be the teacher, the instructor of the town. So it's something, a new occurrence. What I'm speaking today is not a new occurrence that took place. What have discovered took place already in the past. It's a big difference. A new occurrence, needs to go through the mechanism of release. When turns out a discovery of the past, it's a totally different. That's what you meant, correct? Yeah.
Nevertheless, this is exit or.
Yeah, but exit, it's a new mechanism.
Way out.
there is two types of, there is a mechanism that the neder, the vow, takes effect, and a new mechanism comes to release. And then what we're learning today, that it doesn't even takes effect, so it doesn't need to be released. To be released, when something is taking effect, then you need another mechanism to release it. But if something doesn't take effect to begin with, a mechanism of release is not necessary.
Yesterday's statement was very categorical, you know, and now you are talking about that there could be a way and situation where...
Yeah, but to begin with, it doesn't take effect, correct. Correct.
No,
Correct.
okay.
Then so we went through what we called nidri onsin in a case for pirates, when a person made the wrong presumption, so then the neder doesn't take effect. There is a third type of a neder, which is called nidri ziruzin. And this is something very interesting. Many times when people are about to interact via a business transaction, and let's say there is an object that is here for sale, and the seller offers the item for $3, and he is so determined to sell it to $3, and he takes upon himself a vow: any cent less than 3, I'm not going to sell it to you. The buyer makes a similar promise that I'm not willing to pay for it more than $1. Any cent above $1, forget about it. I'm not going to make it. Despite the fact that they made a vow, both the buyer made a vow not to pay for it more than $1, and the seller made a vow not to sell it less than $3, it's okay for them to come to a middle ground, let's say, to make a transaction for $2. And the reason, because typical vows that they come in such a context, they don't have a final internal determination to what we call gmirus hadas. It's not really being finalized. It's part of the normal ritual that generally takes place within a context of business dealings. So here is another third example where the vow doesn't take place even to begin with.
This kind of everyday dealing, you know, especially when goes bargaining, why it should be given the nobility of given vow. Why it should be given?
No, if a person made, we're talking over here, if a person went ahead.
But this,
The reason why those three situations, the vow doesn't take effect in them, because since it is written originally in the Torah, lo yachel dvorei, the word lo yachel, he should not violate his words, but also it contains an additional meaning. Yachel means from chulin. Chulin, something that is unholy, something that is desecrated. So as long as a person is not intentionally desecrating, which means to begin with, in a situation of a pirate, it's not a desecration of his word, because a word to a pirate, given the fact that he is basically finds himself in a situation where against his will, so it's okay. See, same situation as we spoke in a context of a wrong presumption, it's not his fault. A third, when it comes in a business dealing, all those situations, a violation is not a desecration. That's the idea. Each and every situation must be assessed whether bridging of his word is really a desecration of his words. Lo yaseh dvor of chulin, he should not make his words unholy. That's the explanation. Now, talking back about the mechanism of releasing the vow. Until now, we spoke where the vow doesn't take effect, so you don't need to release. But in those situations where the vow is indeed taking effect, and then you do need to release, the release of the vow is taking the same structure as the release out of oath. Same way as oath is being released or via one expert or three normal people, not what we call the expert, three hediotos or one mumche. Same thing, the same procedure goes in release of vows. The only thing that you cannot release when it comes to an item of tmur. Remember yesterday we spoke that generally vow can refer to any form of prohibition a person takes upon himself, or any form of designating a animal or birds or any other object to the temple, and that's called hekdesh. So same way as a person is able to release a personal vow that he takes upon himself, a person can go and release any designation of a property to hekdesh. But there is one exception, which is called tmur. Tmur is a very unique situation where a person takes a existing animal which is already designated as an offering, and the animal is in a perfect condition, qualifies for offering. Then a person wants to exchange this animal that is already designated to offering with another animal. So the ruling is that both of them will be as holy, both the one that he wanted to exchange and the one that he wanted to exchange with. Both of them, it's called tmur, exchange. In such a case, both of them will remain holy to such an extent that there is no way to release the status from neither of them, not from the original holy item and not for the exchange one. This is the only exception where a release mechanism do not work. There many times we have learned in Shavuos as well that the only way to release any vow when the vow takes effect. In other words, if a person made a vow the following way, he said that this particular animal will be holy, and in case I will go and release myself from this particular vow, then I'm taking upon myself a second vow. So the only time where he can go and release himself from the second vow, only after he released himself from the first vow, because he cannot go and introduce the release mechanism before he's being exposed to the second vow. Yesterday, we have learned about a term that is called hatposo. Hatposo means an attachment. An attachment is when a person tells that this item will be prohibited, and also the second item, and also item number 3. In such a case, if a person released himself from the first one, automatically he is being released from the second and third one, because the second and third are attached to the first one. However, if the person released himself from the third one only, so he is released only from the third one, but he is still obligated to fulfill the first two. That's the rule in attachment. If a person took upon himself without adding the word "n," he says all those 3 items will be prohibited, and he made a release on one of them, in such a case, all 3 of them will be released as well, because they are all blended with each other. when a person takes upon himself a prohibition, a restriction not to benefit from the residents of a particular city, then he is in a big dilemma. Should he go to the local rabbi of that city and ask him to go through the release process of the vow? The problem is, since this rabbi happens to be a resident of the city, so by him releasing him from the vow, in fact he is violating the vow, because the vow was not to benefit, but in no way, from the residents of the city. So when he's going to the rabbi and ask him to release him from the vow, before he's being released, he's seemingly violating his vow. The answer, to begin with, he should go to a different rabbi. But after the fact, if he went to the local rabbi of that city, though he happens to be from a residence of that city, nevertheless, since it is in the context of releasing of the vow, it will be fine. There is two interesting scenarios. There is one scenario where a person said, if I will go today to the store, so tomorrow I won't be able to eat. There is another case, a person says, I won't be able to eat today if tomorrow I'm going to go to the store. So when a person says, I won't be able to eat today if tomorrow I'm going to go to the store, he should not eat today. Why? Because tomorrow he may go to the store, and if he will go tomorrow to the store and he would be eating today, he would be in violation of his vow. So for that reason, it is recommended for him not to eat today. But however, if he went and ate today, so if he went tomorrow to the store, retroactively it turns out that he violated his vow and he is subject to lashes. If he did not went to the store, it's fine. However, if a person says, if today I'm going to go to the store, tomorrow I'm not allowed to eat. Is he allowed to go to the store or is he not allowed? So the answer, he is allowed to go to the store. If he went to the store, so tomorrow he won't be able to eat. If he did not go, tomorrow he will be able to go to eat. So the reason that I would treat him lightly on the condition side, because people are generally forgetting the condition, but they won't forget about the outcome of their condition. There is what we call the consequence of their condition, which is the real preservation of the vow, and then the condition that is attached to the vow. So for that reason, depends where the condition. If the condition is preceding the outcome, he doesn't need to be careful about the condition. But if the condition is after the outcome, so he needs to be careful in the outcome that comes before the condition. So it's a very interesting. That's basically the first chapter. The second chapter is dealing about the ability of a person not only to restrict upon himself to benefit from another person, which means I am part of a vow, I can take upon myself a vow not to benefit from, let's say, Reuven. From Mr. Reuven, I'm not, in case I have benefited from him, then I will be subject to the punishment. That's the rule. However, if I have not only restricted myself to benefit from another person, I took I restricted upon another person to benefit from myself. Same way as I have restricted to benefit from Reuven, I restricted Reuven to benefit from me. So since I'm a owner of my belonging, Reuven is prohibited to benefit from me. However, if he went ahead and benefited, he is not subject to lashes because he did not accepted the violation. I have a right to restrict my self upon him, but I don't have a right to impose a violation in case he went ahead and did it. However, in a case that I went ahead and restricted upon Reuven any benefit from the property of Shimon, which means I'm restricting a third party to benefit from a fourth party. Yeah? I'm restricting one third party to benefit from a third party. In such a case, it doesn't even take effect because a person cannot have any form of ownership to restrict anything that is not in his possession and not belongs to him. However, if the third party consented to the restriction by replying with Omein, then it takes effect like any other restriction which we have learned that can take effect when a person say Omein. A person, let's say, he says that this particular fruits, which happens to be his, will be restricted upon you. So even after those fruits left my ownership, or via sale, or via death, or via any form of transportation, since when they were in my possession, I was designating them as this fruit, so the restriction upon the individual never really moves away. It will always remain. However, if I have said, my fruits will be restricted upon you, so at the moment they are not mine anymore, or because I have sold it, or because my children inherited, or any other transfer of ownership, then the other party can benefit from it because it's not mine anymore. There is a story about the chief rabbi of Haifa, Harav Sher Yeshuv HaKohen. When he visited the Rebbe in Yechidus, the Rebbe shared with him memories about his grandfather. His grandfather was Rabbi Etkin. He lived in a city called Luga, not far from Leningrad, in Russia. At that time, when the Rebbe was a fugitive, where the Russian authorities were after him for being involved in counter-revolutionary activities, so he hid in the house of his grandfather for about half a year, 6 months. And when he was by him on the audience, the Rebbe told him that your grandfather had great qualities. And he paused for a few seconds. And in those few seconds, he thought to himself, what can be the great qualities about my grandfather that impressed the Rebbe so much? And then the Rebbe looks at him, he says, your grandfather, he was a very, very poor man. And he was a worker in a zavod. And by being such a person who was poor and hard-working, the last person that the authorities will suspect that I'm hiding by him will be your grandfather. So it was a perfect situation that I was able to be by him until I managed to cross the border to Poland and leave Russia. And he was very appreciative for that great kindness that he was done. I was thinking about this story today when we have learned in the second chapter situation where a person is restricted to benefit from his friend due to a vow he took upon himself, and yet there is still a way for him to benefit, but in the context of vows, it's not going to be considered a benefit. For example, we always hear financial reports of companies, and there is two terms in accounting. There is companies who are in the red, and there is companies who are in the black. Generally in the red, which means they're still operating on losses. And I guess in the old accounting books, any minus was on a red ink, and any plus was on a black ink. So if a person is operating in the red, so he is allowed to benefit from the person who is restricted to benefit from by having this person paying off his debt. Because paying off a debt is not considered in the context of vows a benefit, because it's not bringing him to in the black. He's still in the red. So he's less in the red, but he's still in the red. So as far as he's still in the red, it's not considered benefit in that context. It's okay for him to pay the ksuva that he owes his wife. It's okay for him to pay the half a shekel annual contribution to the temple budget that each and every Jew doing it annually, because paying off pre-existing obligation is not considered benefit. So this is an interesting rule that when it comes to Isuri Hanoe, restriction of benefit, so benefit means above neutral, but below neutral is still not considered a benefit. If a person took upon himself a restricted item, let's say food, an apple, and this apple happened to be mixed with other food, got cooked in a soup. So it is very important what was his wording. If he said, a apple is prohibited upon myself, so at the moment that this a apple was mixed with other foods, though that the taste of the apple is in the food, but the food itself is not an apple, so therefore he's allowed to benefit. However, if he said this apple is prohibited upon myself, and this apple happened to be mixed in the other foods, then I will apply the same rulings that we have learned in the laws of kashrus. What was the ruling? So first of all, if it is min b'she'enoi minoi, if it is what we called apple in other kinds, apple with vegetables, so then I will apply the ruling of noisen tam. If I can taste the apple in the other products, it will be prohibited. If I cannot taste it, it will be permitted. However, if it is min beminoi, if we're speaking over here about this apple happens to be mixed with other apples, so the ruling is they will all gonna be prohibited. And the reason, you remember, there is one of the exceptions where things cannot be ever nullified when mixed with others. One of the exception rules is dover sheyesh lo matirin, an item that has an expiry date for his restriction. We gave an example, chometz on Pesach, muktzeh on Yom Tev, and here when it comes to an item that is restricted due to a vow, it is also has an expiry date. What is the expiry date? The date that he will go to the rabbi and ask him for release mechanism from his vow. So any items that is yeshloi matirin, that has a ability to remove, to expire, so then it's never going to be annulled min beminoi. If a person takes upon himself, and it's also talking about wording, makes also a big difference. If a person says, this fruit will be upon myself as an offering, which is a typical expression of a vow. So when he says, they will be like an offering, so he is not allowed not to benefit from them, and even those fruit or grains have been planted or they have been sold and exchanged in others, he is still not allowed to benefit. However, if he says, I will not eat them, by saying them, he is limiting them only, but he will be allowed to benefit from their exchange or for future plantation that will come out from these particular grains. The topic of the third chapter is by expanding the boundaries of benefit restriction also to a situation where a person is saying that any benefits that will lead to a digestive pleasure will be restricted. What type of benefits can lead to digestive pleasure? It can be an oven, it can be a fridge, it can be a transportation that takes fruit or food from one location to the other. It will also going to be included in the vow as well. Kohen, if I took upon myself to prohibit, to restrict, to benefit from a kohen. Now he happens to be the only kohen that is there serving in the temple, and I need to bring my offering to him to take care of it, to put it on the altar. It's okay. Reason? Because he's not my agent. He's the agent of God. And for that reason, he is not part of my restriction that I took upon myself. Although I have targeted him, but in the role that he is operating in the temple, he is not my proxy, he is God's proxy. This is a very interesting rule. Yeah. I took upon myself also a restriction to benefit from an individual. This individual happens to teach Torah. So if he teaches the oral tradition, he's okay to learn from him. The reason? Because it is prohibited to charge money for teaching oral Torah. Same way as Moshe Rabbeinu taught the Jews for free. So for that reason, the payment for the teacher is also for oral. For oral Torah is also no payment is being taken. However, when it comes to teach the written Torah, so depends. In those places that they do charge money, so he's not allowed to learn from him the written Torah because it is a benefit. But in those places that they don't charge money also for the written Torah, so he's allowed to learn Torah. So,
sorry, Rabbi, the oral Torah,
it must be done for free.
the teaching,
Yeah.
that's a prohibition to charge.
To charge money, correct. So you will ask me how come in the yeshivos and they being paid, so what they are really being paid is for the babysitting, not for the teaching. Yeah, there is a few ways how to justify it, but for the actual there is a prohibition to this.
I didn't have that in my mind, but I did have. Is that prohibition only active in Eretz Yisrael or
No, everywhere. Yeah.
Everywhere.
Like Moshe Rabbeinu, he is the.
Oh yeah.
To visit the sick. If he happens, is he allowed to visit the sick? Answer yes, but in those places that they actually paying money, that again has a value for him sitting and being accompanying the sick, it's a problem because he's benefiting him when he should not be benefiting him. If a person took upon himself a restriction not to speak with his friend, it's okay to communicate via writing, against texting. I would like to conclude with a very interesting, talking about writing. They say in Israel, what is the difference before the election and after the election? They say before the election, all the walls are speaking, because you're going outside, you see billboards saying vote for that person, vote for that person. After the election, you go and speak to the walls. And for that reason, the original place in the Torah where the rules of vows were written is in Parashas Matois, in the Chumash Bamidbar, and the beginning, the opening statement that Moshe Rabbeinu spoke to Roshei HaMatois, to the community leaders, and he ordered them about all the details about taking vows and oaths and stuff like this. All other rulings, he was speaking to the crowd. Why in this ruling he spoke to the leaders? And the answer is always the problems amongst politicians, community leaders, elected officials is to keep their promise. So for that reason, he gathered them first and he ordered them about the importance of how not to desecrate your word and make your words holy.
Creatively grading comparison.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, thanks.